in the field. They were co-located with Army units or naval units down in the riverine areas. We had, with 6 lieutenant commanders, 75 lieutenants, and 20 enlisted in the field. They went on combat patrols on riverboats with the SEALs or the Army units that they were associated with. Each of them had bilingual South Vietnamese Navy interpreters, naval officers as interpreters who translated when the Nilos were interrogating Viet Cong prisoners. That's when I entered the fascinating world of human intelligence. HUMINT is the word for short. I was never in danger in my 33 years, except from beautiful Vietnamese women in short skirts riding mopeds when I crossed the streets. Okay? Near the end of my 12 months, I volunteered to be an assistant naval attaché in Moscow. Sandra was thrilled. She and our 2 children had spent 6 months, our children had spent 6 months in Florida with her parents, and then they came back to the house we owned in Alexandria because I knew I was going to do all my attaché training in D.C. Upon my return, I was planning to bring back to adopt a Vietnamese child, but didn't have time to do that. So she arranged to adopt a 6-month-old Korean girl. The 2.5-year education and training began with Russian language, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week for 11 months. Our instructors were all former Soviet citizens who had legally immigrated into the United States. They treated us just like Soviet college students. After the language school, we went to attachés from all services, headed to many U.S. embassies worldwide. We gathered for 4 months for intelligence training provided by the Defense Intelligence Agency and the CIA. We called it spy school. All of our spouses were invited, and they were required to have a secret clearance. If you're going to go to be an attaché's wife or husband now these days, each family member, including our 2-year-old daughter, Korean daughter, were issued diplomatic passports. You probably know if you have a diplomatic passport, you can't be arrested in the country where you are accredited for anything, unless you were to murder somebody, and then the U.S. would extradite you, etc. Okay. My sister, Sue, lived with us that first year. In early July, lived with us in Washington for that first year, as I told you. Then in Moscow. And in early July, we flew to London for a week of briefings by the Royal Navy Intelligence Command. And then we flew to Moscow. We were met by one of the assistant naval attachés, and were driven by a Soviet driver to our embassy to check in, and then over to the apartment that we were going to occupy. So the apartment furnished was a furnished apartment by the U.S. government. It was in a large U-shaped 9-story building with 900 Soviet families and 40 diplomatic families. So, and from about 4 different countries. Let's see. For those 2 years that we lived over there, our children played in the courtyard with the children of all those diplomats, as well as a lot of the Soviet kids. terrific experience for them. The US and British embassies ran the Anglo-American School, attended by kids from about 30 different countries, diplomatic families, okay? Our son Rick was 11, daughter Gretchen 8, and Angelica was 2. Outside the apartment building, and Sue really remembers this because she was going in and out quite often as our nanny, Soviet police provided 24-hour surveillance. The embassy was 9 stories high with apartments on each end, occupied by the senior State Department, Agriculture Department, Economic Department, and the senior Army, Navy, and Air Force officers. Our attaché group was composed of 4 Army, 4 Air Force, 3 Navy, and 1 Marine. You know, you always want a Marine, a token Marine. Okay. Okay. Plus, we had 15 NCOs. U.S. embassies around the world are protected 24/7 by Marine security guards. So they were always in the embassy, and Soviet police were stationed 24/7 at the 2 vehicular gates into the courtyard. Each of the 3 military services had 2 KGB, that's secret police, drivers, and 2 Soviet sedans. So each of our 3 groups had those 2 vehicles with drivers, and we knew they were all KGB. And that was for official transportation in daytime, and especially to take us and our spouses to receptions and dinners hosted by the Soviet military. Yeah, we had very good relations with the Soviets at that time, and plus it would take us to the various. There were 70 embassies in Moscow, and many times we were invited to those places. Our apartments, the entire embassy and hotels in which we stayed when we were out traveling for intelligence collection were bugged, and all telephones tapped by the KGB. They also followed us wherever we went. In our training by the DIA and CIA, we learned to be able to identify them. But it's like living